After a first day of meeting in Rio, G20 leaders issued a joint statement Monday highlighting the suffering caused by conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine, while calling for cooperation on climate change, poverty reduction and tax policy. However, they did fail to commit the money the UN is seeking to help developing countries cope with global warming. Well, the summit host, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has three main points up for discussion this Tuesday: trade, poverty and global warming. But these have been pushed into the shadows by more urgent topics. For more, I'm joined by our international affairs editor, Philip Turle. Philip, what then has taken the limelight?
OK, well, there's good and bad. And looking at the headlines on some of the dispatches today from the different news agencies from around the world, there's one that summed it up, and that is Brazil's G20 summit produces a broad declaration that is short on specifics. And I think that's probably the best way of summing it up. And what we've got here is a group of people in a room who respect each other mostly, but don't get on always and don't see eye to eye on many subjects. And they're being told that they've got to come up with a final declaration on which they agree. So the less they agree, the more is a very sort of wishy-washy agreement on several divisive subjects, the more that's going to look good on the final declaration, which is what I think we've got here. But there are two good points here. The first one is that there has been success on the Global Alliance for Poverty. That was one of the key points put forward by Brazil's President Lula da Silva. 81 countries, even 82 countries, some agencies are saying, have signed up for this. They are engaging to reach about 500 million people by the end of the decade, and 64 international organizations are saying they're ready to implement these changes, which could include things like, for example, free canteens for children around the world where they are concerned. So there is some progress on that measure, which is good as far as President Lula is concerned. The other one is that there has been an agreement to tax the super rich. It's been contested by Argentina's President Javier Milei, but all the other countries are in agreement about all of this. $250 billion a year could be taken in as a result of that, which could be used for other things, other causes around the world. So there is progress on those two issues. Now, where it is a little bit more wishy-washy and where I think the best way of summing it up is could do better is on action on climate change, on the Middle East and on the war in Ukraine. We'll take the last two first. The Middle East, I think most countries are in agreement, as in Ukraine, that there has to be an end to those wars. No one disagrees on that. How they're going to reach the end of those wars is a subject of division. There are those who want the two-state solution implemented in Israel, between Israel and the Palestinians in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. They want an end to the war in Gaza. They also want an end to the war in Lebanon. And they also want an end to the conflict in Ukraine. Where there's been no agreement is how that's going to be reached. They all say, yes, we have to install what they call a just and long-term peace. But this time round, there's no direct criticism of Vladimir Putin, no direct criticism of Russia, just the willingness on part of all those taking part that the war in Ukraine should reach a viable solution in the long run.
So what about climate change then? Have we seen any encouraging news on that issue?
That's another, I think, definitely could do better element of this G20 summit. There is an agreement to increase global funding, but without an agreement about where that money is going to come from. It's going to be from billions to trillions. That's what the United Nations has been calling for. Many of the participants here have been calling for. But there is going to be one great big elephant in the room, and that is Donald Trump, who is going to take office from the 20th of January. And as he's been repeatedly saying all the way through his campaign, we're going to drill, baby, drill into fossil fuels to make sure that they are used in the United States to keep prices down. There's also a question being raised as to whether the United States is going to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord. Remember that Donald Trump did pull out of it back in 2016. It was Joe Biden who went in when he was elected afterwards. Pretty much the signs coming from Donald Trump's side is that, yes, they're going to re-pull out of it again afterwards. So that's not good news for the fight against global warming. But Brazil is trying hard to influence that. Brazil's going to take over the next COP, the COP30 next year, even though the COP29 taking place in Azerbaijan right now let's say it's been running into difficulty. That's a bit of an understatement, but no real progress is being made there. So I think President Lula would really like to end this summit by saying, well, look, next year we really are going to make progress in bringing down global warming to 1.5 degrees.
And how much is this G20 summit a showcase of President Lula in a bid to rehabilitate his country and himself?
He's been trying very hard, and since he was re-elected after beating Jair Bolsonaro back in 2022, he's been to 32 countries, he's spent more than 2.5 months abroad, and since 2003, in his first term, he's made 139 trips to 80 countries. Not many world leaders can do that. He's been trying really hard to show that what he's been saying all the way around is that Brazil is back after Jair Bolsonaro's term in office, who was considered an international pariah. But there have been criticism. There's been criticism of some of his positions, not criticising Vladimir Putin, saying Vladimir Putin could come to this summit, wouldn't be arrested, even though there's an international arrest warrant, and being a bit unclear on how the war in Ukraine should come to an end. But I think globally he can say he's done his best to try to make this a G20 summit which was as successful as it could have been.
All right, Philip Turle, thank you very much for that insight.